It was March of 2018 when Sherry Russell went to see her doctor with her husband to get the news. And the doctor that day gave them the news that they never dreamt they'd hear. I've got bad news. And the doctor looked at Sherry and her husband Charlie and said, I'm really sorry, but the x-ray of your husband's lung showed a mass, and we think it's cancer. Sherry and her husband Charlie were devastated. They took that information, went to the best specialists they could find. They did a biopsy, they did a CAT scan, they did a chest x-ray, they did everything. And it confirmed the bad news. There was lung cancer. The cancer was in his lungs, in his brain, and it was stage 4. Those words that no one ever wants to hear. But Sherry didn't give up. Her husband went through chemotherapy, months and months of chemotherapy, radiation treatment. And he lived and he fought hard to try to beat the unbeatable fight. But 21 months later, everything came to an end. After all the chemo and radiation happened, Sherry went back to the doctor at St. Peter's Hospital and asked, why did this happen? My husband had had an x-ray of his chest 1 year ago. And they told us everything was fine, nothing to worry about. And then that doctor gave Sherry and Charlie some shocking news. The mass in the lung was there a year before the diagnosis. And no one told Sherry or Charlie anything about it. In October of 2019, Charlie Russell, a man who grew up, lived, and worked in Woodstock, New York his whole life, died of a totally preventable condition, lung cancer. And when Charlie Russell died in October of 19, that began the second part of the story. The story was the quest to get some answers why the mass in Charlie's lung wasn't reported a year earlier before the diagnosis. So Sherry did what anyone would do. She wasn't looking to sue anyone. She went to a lawyer and said, can you get the records and find out? I'm just looking for answers. So Sherry went to a local attorney and he got the chest x-ray, and what we found out by having a radiologist look at it was, yeah, the mass in the lung was there a year before the diagnosis. And a year before the diagnosis, the cancer, the mass was small. It was confined to one small area of the lung. And this was something with surgery, it could have been easily removed and cured by surgery. But because Kingston Hospital did not tell Sherry about the mass in her husband's lung, he didn't know anything about it. Sherry was really upset. She and her husband, she lost her husband, and her son, Zach, lost his dad because of something that was completely preventable. And the second part of the story is also really frightening and scary. Because Sherry and her attorneys and our law firm then went to Kingston Hospital and said, we want all the records. We gave them all the proper authorization, power of attorney, death certificate, in perfect compliance with the law in March of this year. And the hospital refused. We're not giving you the records. Over and over again, in the second part of the story, we went back to the hospital. All we want is the records. We want some answers here. Hospital said, go away. From March of 2020 all the way through July of this year, we just trying and kept trying, and we got stonewalled every time. In July, we were totally fed up, and we said to our client, Sherry, we said, Sherry, I want you to go to Kingston Hospital, bring the paperwork that you need, the authorization, the death certificate, and everything. Go to the medical records department. We're going to tell them that you're coming with these documents and they can't turn you away. Sherry did what we asked her to do. She took all the authorizations, death certificate, she went to Kingston Hospital's medical records department, and they told her just what they told us. Go away. You have to use Ciox. And Ciox, who is Ciox? Ciox is a company that is in Georgia that handles all the medical records issues for Kingston Hospital. But here's the kicker. Under federal law, the maximum charge that a patient can be charged for electronic medical records is $6.50, with rare exception. Ciox, this vendor in Georgia, wanted to charge for the photocopy fees of paper records that Sherry never wanted. Our law firm never wanted it. Sherry insisted on electronic medical records, and Kingston Hospital refused. They stonewalled her. And this has been going on not simply in Sherry's case. There's a much deeper issue here. This is systemic. Kingston Hospital has been doing this over and over again with people just like Sherry. Other patients who simply want their medical records. They're not necessarily looking to sue anyone. They want answers. And the hospital is stonewalling them just like they stonewalled Sherry. So, in July, we wrote a letter to the CEO of Kingston Hospital. We copied the Medical Records Department and the New York State Department of Health. And our letter laid out all of the history of the refusal of the hospital to give the medical records going back to March of this year. The hospital ignored that letter. In August, we wrote another letter. And this time, we were even more firm. If the records aren't provided by September 3rd, we are going to sue Kingston Hospital and Ciox for refusing to comply with the basic rights under New York state law and federal law for patients to have their medical records. The hospital once again ignored the letter. No response at all. From March until September, this is how Kingston Hospital has been conducting itself, and they've been doing it not just here, they've been doing it over and over again. We've tracked cases just like Sherry's, and we found that even though New York law requires that medical records be produced within 10 days by the hospital, and federal law gives 30 days to comply with a request for records, Kingston Hospital on average takes 87 days to comply with a request for medical records. And they refuse to give electronic medical records. So if you ask for your medical records from Kingston Hospital, they will demand that you get them from Ciox in Georgia and that you pay the 75 cents per page photocopy fee that is not allowed or permitted by federal law. This is a violation of basic rights under both New York state law and federal law, and Kingston Hospital and their friends at Ciox don't care. That's why today, September 4th, we filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of Sherry and others similarly situated, meaning other people with the same complaint, against Kingston Hospital and Ciox for violating basic rights of federal and state law. Because it's time that someone stands up and says, this isn't right. Patients own their medical records, not the hospital. The hospital cannot monetize medical records and try to profit off of them. This is the right of the patients to have their records, and this is Sherry's story. Sherry, I would like to ask you a few questions, if you might share with us. When you went to Kingston Hospital and you asked for the records from them, what did you say and how did it feel when they turned you away?
Well, I asked for my husband's medical records. They said that I had to have paperwork. I showed them the paperwork that I had, and they said, no, you can't have them, and sent me away.
Sherry, how did it feel when the hospital sent you away, even though you had all the proper authorizations and documentation that you needed?
Frustrated.
And how does it feel today, years after your husband's death, to know that to this day, you don't have the records from Kingston Hospital that you need for the answers about what happened to him.
I just want the answers to find out if this could have been prevented.
Thank you. And we all want answers. We all want to find out what happens. And we know the sad part of this is not just Sherry's story and Zach's story. This is the story of people around the state and country who are being denied medical records by hospitals for the purpose of monetizing and profiting off of medical records. And this is going to come to an end right now. We brought this class action not just for Sherry, but for people just like you, so that you will have the right under federal law to get all of the records whenever you want them for payment of a reasonable fee. Now, that's the question. What I'm going to do at this time is bring in Melanie Carpenter, who's an attorney with a firm called Chart Squad, who has a background of getting records directly through a patient portal for patients just like Sherry. And if I could bring you in, Melanie, at this moment, can you share with us the story of what happened to with Chart Squad when you tried to get the records for Sherry and others like her?
Well, yes, it's a common story here. You know, our main purpose as a company, Chart Squad, is to protect people just like Sherry, and to enforce their rights under federal law. And there are state laws too that apply here. But basically what happens is after someone tries over and over and over again to get records, they'll come to Chart Squad for help. And we have a large team of educated individuals that follow up and try to get providers to comply with these laws. What's been happening most recently is the medical provider, the hospital, as you were explaining, says, you know, we don't have anything to do with this. You need to call SciAx. We've hired SciAx, leave us alone. Well, SciAx is a profit center. Their main goal is to make money. They have no patient relationships and they could care less about anybody else's life. Their point is to make money. So when you are pushed off to someone like SciAx, the goal is to get them to comply with federal law, because if they don't, the hospital may no longer do business with them. That didn't happen here. The hospital did not care about what the laws were or what their vendor or their copy service was attempting. Under federal law, they're considered a business associate. So we were given an invoice in thousands of dollars after being stonewalled over and over and over again, which is pretty classic. It's a classic story. I mean, we've made a lot of headway with a lot of different locations, but there are some stubborn SciAx representatives out there. As you said, they're in Georgia. They're accessing these records electronically. They can easily drag them into a new folder and drop them into the Chart Squad portal. They're choosing not to. They are working a paper scam, because if they print every single page, they can charge for every single page. So, you know, those are the rules and the scams and the loopholes that we try to avoid, and we try to get them to, you know, filter through, like, just send the records. You know, you don't get to make $6,000 off of somebody's loss here. As you said, medical records are not a profit industry, but that's what they've turned into. SciAx is not the only company with these egregious actions. And to be quite honest with you, where this really all lays, it all falls on the hospital itself. You know, they have relationships with these people. They have already been paid for their medical services. They have electronic record systems. This is not something that's difficult for them to do, yet they offload this burden onto a profit center. And that's the biggest problem we're having here. There are changes in the laws that are coming up to support patients in this situation, which is great. However, the problem is that nobody cares. And the copy services like SciAx, they don't want to follow the law. They want to make money. And that's why we're here, because that's not right. As you can imagine, that's just not right.
No, that's right. And thank you so much. Melanie for sharing that information, because it is so vital to patients, and the work that you do with Chart Squad is so important. And what it really boils down to is that when a patient asks for their records, and a hospital like Kingston Hospital outsources it to a company like Ciox, Ciox will often send the records on a CD that is that consists of electronic medical records, yet they bill for photocopy fees of paper records. It is an absolute fraud. When you're charging for photocopy fees, yet you're providing electronic medical records, you're simply trying to monetize and profit off of patient medical records that belong to people like Charlie Russell. This was completely preventable, and as a result of this, we have a nice man and his family who were split up. Charlie Russell's death was completely preventable. He was denied the opportunity for a cure, and part of that now it's made even worse by the fact that the hospital is refusing to give him and his family the medical records that would give them all the answers about what happened to him. At this time, we're going to open it up. If anyone has questions, you can unmute your mic, and you're welcome to ask any question that you have. Well, if we don't have any questions, then what I'm going to do is thank you very much, everyone, for participating in today's press conference. The lawsuit that Sherry is bringing against Kingston Hospital and Ciox is a class action lawsuit, which means if you know someone who has been wrongfully stonewalled by Kingston Hospital or Ciox, please let our law firm know, John H. Fisher, PC, and we will be happy to investigate, find out the merit of your claim, and if in fact Kingston Hospital has been stonewalling you, just like Sherry Russell, we'll be happy to have a conversation with you. Thank you, everyone, for making time for this.